All right, so now we're going to go in there and make the handle for this Gladius that we have. Before we get started, though, I want to point out that I changed the concept a little bit, just because it seems to be more accurate to the period piece, and because the other one was a lot more complicated for our first endeavor into modeling and different styles for modeling. So we took all this nonsense off, all the extra stuff, and we just left basically the handle part is the thing that we changed. You can see over here. It's just this grooved version where that hand would hold it. And then the pommel has stayed the same, which is the base of the sword. And then the guard, which is up here, has stayed generally the same. The form has stayed the same, but you'll notice on the side, it is now rounded instead of this one flat piece. But one of the things you'll notice is that this is the front side is wider than this side. It's actually parallel. The pommel and the guard should be parallel on both sides. Now, one more thing I want to point out about concepts and things like this. These are guidelines, not hard, fast rules. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't, you can just say, I don't want to have a curve here. It just means if it doesn't match exactly, that's fine. Because after we build this, now we got to texture it, and I have nothing for the textures except for examples that I found on the internet, and you'll find of your own. And we're going to go from there. So now we have the concept changed out a little bit. Let's jump over to Max. And to put that concept, and here's our blade right there, but to put that concept into the scene, all we have to do is go back to wherever that picture is. In this case, I'll just grab it, the folder I have it in, and what I'll do is I've already changed it in here, but I'll change it back and then change it back again just to show you how easy it is. So the new file that I've uploaded is going to be Gladius F new, and that's what's on here right now. But we're going to change Gladius F new back to Gladius F. So I'm just going to grab the picture, and I grabbed it off screen, but it's on my Windows Explorer. And I just grab it and I drag it on here. And it's going to say, that's definitely, if you see this pop up, say no, cancel. You did something wrong. So I want to make sure that I'm going to, oh, you know what I have? I have these frozen, so I can't. So I'm unfreeze all. You can't drop it on there if it's frozen. It's going to think you're dropping it in the background. Perfect. I'm glad that happened. So Gladius F, I'm going to drag it back on here and click. And you'll see the base changed right there. That's as easy as it is. And then the Gladius F new back to where we are now. We'll get deeper into how this is actually working at a different point, but for now it's just the quick way to grab and throw some background plates into the environment again. All right, let's get to the handle. And we're going to do this in parts. I'm going to talk about each part a little bit more individually. I'm actually going to hide, let's hide this, and then I'll just say freeze selection, so now they're both frozen again. So I don't have to have a chance to grab them. If you look at it with the wireframe there. So what I'm going to start with, there's a few ways you could do this. You can make this as separate pieces. You can make this as a single piece. We're going to do it as a single piece as more of an exercise in how it could be done, or we used to do it, and it also makes it a little bit different and maybe easier when you're putting textures on it. But for now, we're just going to do it as one large piece, sort of. We're going to make parts out of it and put them back together. But let's go forward here. We'll just go to F and go to front. If I look at this, I just want a circular shape, and kind of a cylinder shape, right? And ignore this line not showing up and this line not showing up. The aliasing inside of Max's viewports is not the greatest. If we look here, they do have the lines. Oh, this one doesn't though. Oh, it's a separate piece, but still, everything else is supposed to be there. They're just not showing up the maps. And again, if you wanted to put an extra bevel on that, you could, but see how that line's not showing up, that's fine. Okay, so we don't want to build it from the front. We're going to build it from the top. And there's a reason we're going to build it from the top besides the standard, and here's the objects, or here's the clings. I just pushed F4 and it brought up the wireframes. So the reason we're going to build it from the top is because spheres have these things called poles. And the reason I don't generally use spheres is that reason, but for our case, it's going to work out great. Let me show you what I mean with a pole is real quick here. We'll pull it up, and I'll click it out, and there it is. And then I'll right-click to get out, and then I go over here to purple, and go purple. And now we have our purple. And if I go to front, we can see that it's big and stuff. I'm not worried about that. Let's just look at the poles and all that. I'm going to turn the grid off for right now just by pushing G. If I look at this, it comes up to a point at the top, and if we look at it, it kind of unevenly and diagonally makes this object a sphere, and it puts this pole here. And when we do higher res stuff, it starts to pinch and do weird stuff. So we don't generally use spheres to make sphere type objects. We have other methods, but in this case, it's actually going to work out for us. Okay, so let's go back to the front real quick, and then we'll just make this transparent by Alt X, like we've talked about. And I'm going to come over here, and since I haven't done anything to it, I can scale it. I can change the scale in here. I don't have to go over to scale and scale it out, because that might mess up the X form and all that stuff. So I'm going to just scale it down and kind of grab it to where I want it. One thing I can probably count on is that it needs to be 0, 0, and it looks like I actually did a pretty good job of lining that up 0, 0. So that's crazy. It actually can't be exact, but it looks like it thinks it is. And whatever, we'll just leave it the way it is. And then we're going to pull it down a little bit more till we get it probably to the width that we want, at least. So the center of this sphere is right at around the center. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be close enough. And I'm going to do this real quick. It's just going to bug me if I don't. So it's exactly center in the world. And I think my drawing may be a little bit off center. So there you go, my example. So center on the edges, I should say. I'm going to pull it up a little bit more so this edge right here is centered inside of this bar that we're going to put on there eventually. Okay, so now we have it. We're close, but it's obviously too tall, and if we look at it from the left, it's too everything. Okay, so let's start with the tall. So we'll go back to front real quick, and at this point we're going to scale, and we only want to scale in this up-down direction, because I don't want to scale it in uniformly because it'll take in the sides. And even though I want to do the back a little bit differently, I want to do some tweaking before I do that. So I'm going to go ahead and scale it down until I get to something like that. And again, I haven't collapsed it, so I still have the primitive controls. What I'm looking at here is not only the width, matching this really close, but I'm also actually looking at this line right here. So if this line actually lines up with where the handle hits inside of the pommel, that makes my life a little bit easier later on. So I'm going to say that's good, okay? And then I'm going to go look at it at the left. And now the problem I have is while this object here is less, go back off there and then go to, let's make it less transparent. And I'll hide my wireframe real quick. And while my pommel is very non-round and it's less deep on the outsides, the handle that goes up should be a perfect cylinder, meaning that it should be round all the way around. If I scale it, let me show you what I mean. If I scale it in this direction to get it to match, or I should say scale it in this direction to get it to match, now my handle doesn't have that perfect circle. And really, I guess that's okay, but it's just not the way it's designed. We're going to pretend that round is the way it is because that's the way most concepts have it. So I don't want to squash, the weird word, squish this circular top. I want to leave that the same because we're going to try and build the handle straight out of the base of this. Okay, so how do we do that? What are we going to do? So this will give us an opportunity to use a couple more tools. I'm going to go left again, okay, and then I'm going to put Alt X to get that back in transparent. At this point, I'm done with the base primitive changes. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say convert to editable poly. So now I'm back to editable poly. What I can do is I can scale it in this direction on a sub-object level, but tell it to not scale the top. Makes sense? Kinda, right? So watch, I can say, like, for example, I could come up here and grab all of these verts and then just scale it in this direction, like that. If I look up here, now this top part, if you even look at it straight down, let me go to 2 here. If you look at it straight down, you can see that the top edge still is a perfect cylinder, perfectly round, but the bottom edge pulls in. Okay, so that may work perfectly, but actually it doesn't because we've got this weird bevel thing. So this will give me the opportunity to show you a tool. I don't use this often. We used to use a lot more, but it's the soft selection tool, and if you don't have it opened up, it could be a lot of different places, but if you've set this up like we talked about, if you come to the soft selection, it's somewhere in here. It's one of these tabs, and you open it up, and if I turn on soft selection and I go back to vert and I select just this much, let's just select one vert, everything around that one vert goes orange. What soft selection does is it says you can select everything around it in a certain controlled degrees or radius, and those verts are going to be less affected by whatever you do to the vert you're on. So as you can see, if I move, this one's pretty big here, but if I move just this one vert here, it's going to move everything like that, but it's actually a little bit off. If you look, it's a tiny bit off. Well, let me show you more example of that. If I change the fall off to something smaller like 0.05, now you get a better idea of what I'm looking at. So when I move this vert now, it doesn't even touch the stuff back here, and then it resets itself to over here. So for our purposes, this is going to be great. All we need to do is come and grab everything again below that and try to see if that's what we want, or maybe we go one down below that. Yeah, let's go one down below that, I think. And then we will just use the scroller bars, and if we click and drag down, it will let us come down here. We'll do it like, we don't want the top one. All right, we want that one to stay the same, so we're going to leave that one there. And we'll just try that and see how that works. Then we go back to the scale tool. We scale it in. It's a little bit, still a little bit rounded. Let's see if we can get it better. Let's go down to, first off, let's deselect this one. Okay, and then we'll go up actually, so we can grab those top ones there. So now this one is being affected. I'm grabbed everything down here. You can turn it off to see. I've grabbed all these, and what I'm going to do is say affect these two above it as well. So when I pull this in, and see it's still not quite enough right there. So some of this stuff we may do by hand, and this may be the reason that we don't use it as much as we used to, is because it's always going to be a little bit of a dance. So yeah, I'm not crazy about that. Let me try one more setting. This is, again, the idea of soft selection is awesome, but you end up doing this back and forth, and it would just be faster sometimes just to go straight up and fix it. So let's see. Really, it's a little bit better. Let's see if that looks like. I think I have a slight circle in here, and I can show you how to fix that real quick too. Okay, so we have it now, and I'm going to turn off my soft selection. Make sure you turn it off, because if you don't, then you're going to be regretting it later. And if you have it on, make sure you turn it off. So, because the thing about soft selection is it doesn't matter what sub-object mode you're in. If it's on, it's in all of them. So turn it off if you're done. Okay, so now I've got this. It's kind of the right size. It's the scale. It looks like the top's doing pretty good. Okay, so what do I want to do? I'm going to go to the front here again. I'm going to go to 1 to go to vert mode. And this time I want to select every vert above the edge where it lines up with the pommel, or the handle going up, okay? I'm just trying to grab everything above where they connect. So once I do that, and you can do it any way you want. If it's easier for you to see, if you go to 4 and go to poly mode and just grab them this way, you want to grab all of these, because what we're going to do is delete them. We don't need them. We are going to build our handle straight out of this. So we're going to say delete. And if I look at the top now, it looks like it's pretty round. If it's not round enough for me, there's ways you can fix it, but I think that's fine for this class. And I don't want to go too into detail. We'll do some fixing on the round down here real quick. So one of the things we look at when we look at this pommel is that it's got a little spike on the end. And if we look at the spike, it should probably be round, right? And how do we fix that problem? Because this isn't round. Well, what we're going to do eventually, and we can make it not round, but I really want it to be round. So I'm going to click on that one vert and look at this cool thing that if you just, without doing anything else, if I just pull this down, I've got a spike that's there. It's probably the wrong width and everything, but at least I know I can pull a spike out of this super fast, super easy. Okay, so what do I do about it being oblong or oval? I'm going to go ahead and delete that spike Yeah, I know, I lost all that control. Don't worry, you can get it back super easy. And I'm gonna come to this one called border. We don't talk about this much yet, but border allows you to grab any edge that is open to the world, doesn't have a closed surface, doesn't have a next to it polygon. So if I grab that, it grabs that one. If I didn't do that, I could do it with edge. It's no different than edge. If I double click on it, it selects a loop. But if I do it this way, it just makes it really easy. I can't select anything but that. It makes it super easy, right? So there's a modifier inside of the modifier menu called Spherify, okay? I'll do it from the drop down. I just want to explain there's a bunch of different little tools to make things go round, and eventually we'll get to them. There's some loop tools and stuff to make this circular, but I've never been really happy with the results with those, and they always make me have to tweak them. This is the best one that I found that does it for me like that. It does take one more step after I do it because you aren't able to modify the lower, the edges and the sub objects below it, but we just collapse it back down and bam, we're done. So if you can just get the idea that you collapse and done, you're good. So I'm gonna go up here to Spherify. Well, actually, I'll just go in here and I'll type in SH. Actually, SPH. And there you go, Spherify. If I click on it, suddenly I've got a perfect circle down here, right? Cool. So now what? Well, now I can't do anything with it, so I have to right click again and say convert to over poly. Didn't change anything. Everything is the same. It's just not part of that modifier anymore. The modifier is not part of it anymore. So if I come back to edge mode, or go to this mode, it's right there. Now the one thing I do think I need to do before I go any further is probably shrink this down a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead at this point and actually go to the scale tool. And then what you can do with the scale tool when you're duplicating edges by shift and control drag. Well, in this case, we're going to shift and drag, or shift and scale inward like this. And see what that does? It pulls it in. Now it still leaves a little hole right there. We're going to fix that by coming over to, with that whole edge selected, coming over to collapse. So basically, we've just told all those verts to be as one vert. And now, if I go back to 1, to vert mode, and I go to move tool, and I pull it down, and I go to front, there it is. It still may not be where I want it to be scale-wise, so if I really wanted to, I could grab this edge right here and scale it in. And then maybe you can see how it kind of deformed the base down there, so I'll pull it down a little bit. There we go. Now we have our perfect cap, spike, and then we have our pommel made. It's got a spike on the bottom and it's got a hole on the top. All right, next we'll go on to the handle.